Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central. And here's your host, Bob Hickey.
Foxborough Central. I am Bob Hickey, your host, thanking you for taking a little bit of time to join with me and my guests as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough truly the gem of Norfolk County. And how does Foxborough really become the gem? It's because of the different threads, if you will, that are woven together to make up the tapestry of our life. I'm going to read you a little story, and this comes from the legendary Locals of Foxborough, that wonderful book by Jeffrey Peterson, our longtime editor and executive publisher of the Foxborough Reporter. He put this book out a couple years ago, and on page 19, he writes a little bit about the history of our New England Patriots, but it's a lot deeper than that. It's the story of E.M. Loew. So if you'll bear with me, I'd like to read an excerpt. For one sufficiently preoccupied with far-flung business interests that he rarely even visited his local holdings, Elias Moses, E.M. Loew, pictured at left greeting House Speaker John McCormick, casts a long shadow in Foxborough. By happenstance of design, Loew, an entertainment magnate who owned movie theaters, drive-ins, hotels, and Latin Quarter nightclubs in both New York and Miami, made two decisions that forever changed Foxborough's destiny. First, at the close of World War II, while returning veterans desperate for entertainment options, he constructed a harness racing track on Route 1 in Foxborough, halfway between Boston and Providence. Known as Bay State Raceway, the track was a booming success, providing jobs and tax revenue for the town and drawing crowds from across southern New England. The second decision, 2 decades later, was even more far-reaching. Loew had been watching closely as Boston Patriots owner Billy Sullivan stalked the State House corridors, seeking support to build a stadium at Neponset Circle for the soon-to-be homeless Patriots. When the deal fell apart, Loew swiftly approached Foxborough selectmen and offered to sell for $1 a parcel next to the raceway. It was a shrewd move, and the gift parcel was just large enough for the stadium structure, and so most of the parking would be on contiguous lots owned by Loew. Local voters, by a 1,852 to 84 margin, approved the proposal, and the rest is history. It was another victory for a compelling character. Just 13 when he left his family in Czernowitz, Austria, Loew first apprenticed to a watchmaker, then waited tables at the famed Jacob Wirth restaurant in the city's theater district. Incredibly, Loew was just 18 when he acquired his first property, the Crystal Movie Theater in Worcester. Not surprisingly, he enjoyed rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and his flamboyant lifestyle was tabloid fodder. Loew's first wife, Sonia, continued to live with him at his 40-acre Milton estate, while his second wife, Mimi, lived in Connecticut. But he also had a conventional side. A Jew who moved to Milton, he built the B'nai Jacob Orthodox Shul on Blue Hills Parkway, and during World War II, he brought the rest of the Loew family from Vienna, probably saving them from Nazi death camps. And again, this was from Jeffrey Peterson's legendary Locals of Foxborough, still available online. So, why do I read this story? Well, Foxborough is a town of history, and it's always interesting when you can scratch it a little bit below the surface. My guest today is Max Loew. And I've known you, Max, for what now? 15 years, 10 years? Members of the JCs?
I've been a JC for
poker buddies.
7 years,
You
yes.
played a little poker. You've probably won a little more from me than I've won from you.
No, I don't do well at poker.
No, all those quarters end up somewhere, and I can't say where. But, you know, Max and I have been friends for a while, and I never had put together the fact that his last name, Loew, had to do with our Loew here in town. And so when Max brought this to my attention, we started tossing around, you know, let's talk a little bit about the history. So while Jeff Peterson did a fantastic job of telling the story, let's talk about the story behind the story. So Max, you are a Loew.
Yes. By ancestry, not very, very close to EM, but
your grandfather was his nephew.
my grandfather is his nephew.
Okay, fantastic.
And he came from Austria. He was one of the members right before the States got into World War II to get out of Austria. pretty much at the last minute.
So that story, the telling by Peterson, is accurate.
It's spot on.
Really?
It's
Well,
a scary story, but
yeah.
it's
Well, let's take the tale from the beginning. He was originally from Czernowitz, Austria, and he came across and started.
He came in the early part of the 1900s, 20th century. So he was already established before his brother, who was my grandfather's father, got here.
Okay.
There were many immigration factors in those days.
Well, let's talk about that. So your grandfather's brother, Ian, what's your grandfather's name, by the way?
He was Moritz.
Okay, so Moritz,
like Morris, but with a TZ.
Moritz and Ian. So
Yeah.
Ian is a successful businessman. He's got theaters, drive-ins, the whole 9 yards. He's living the American dream.
Right.
And the rest of the family, Moritz, is in the old country.
In Austria, in Vienna.
And this is in the 1930s?
Right, this is before he even built the track.
Okay, so this is in a time period, and if we go back in the Wayback Machine, which unfortunately is not all that far ago, Nazi Germany was gaining they were starting their march for world domination, and the Nazis took control politically, and they were starting their programs of denial of rights and confiscation of property, and then they started expanding and going into neighboring Austria, and this is where we pick up the tale.
And at that point, it was already being called Vienna, Germany, and Austria had already lost its title at this point. So my grandfather...
So Moritz was still there.
Right, Moritz, my grandfather, I'm sorry, and a couple other people, I don't know, I couldn't identify it because everybody came separately, and that's where, fast forward to 1937, 1938, EM had to come up with $25,000 a head.
Because at the time, and I am certainly no Jack off the left, but there were immigration laws in place, just like there are today. But at the time, there was a real fear of America being overrun by a tide of immigrants. And the realization, at least I pray that the reason is that the realization was not yet there of the horrors that were being were getting ready to be unleashed.
Right. The states were still in 1938, 3 years before even getting in. Technically being involved in the war.
And politically, the United States was just coming out of the Depression, and they were very much separatist of a political opinion. They had no desire to get involved with Europe's war, Europe's conflict, and it wasn't really until the Lend-Lease program that America started exerting some political muscle, and then it wasn't really until the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor that she jumped in with both feet. So we're really talking 1937, 1938. America didn't want anything to do with it, and they were building some blockades, some fences to keep the problems from coming across.
You had to have an actual citizen to sponsor was one of the rules. The person that EM befriended to be his citizen sponsor was Joseph Kennedy, who was John F. Kennedy's father.
Get out of town.
Can't make it up if I tried.
Wow. Fantastic. So the Kennedys are now sponsoring EM to bring over, that allowed him to bring over.
Right, so EM had to pay.
So how many people was he able to bring over?
At least what I know of is it was 10 people at $25,000 a person.
And I don't have Tom's inflation index indicator in front
of me,
but that was what is that in today's dollars?
I think I got it right. In 1937 dollars, that would be 4.2 million today.
Per person?
No, total for the 10 people that I can think of.
Well, you know what? They say that you cannot put a price on human life, and thank goodness he was able to do that and was in the position to do that. So.
And that was before he even got to the level of Bay State Raceway.
Right. So the family's now over.
Right.
The war happens, and the veterans now returning after the war. 4.5 years of hard fighting.
Right.
According to the story, they're all coming back looking for entertainment, and this is where the idea of having the Bay State Raceway equidistant between Boston and Providence. How did Foxborough get chosen? Do you know?
Well, I have an idea. You know, you talk to so many people and you hear different stories, but if I can mash them all together.
I love stories.
Really what it comes down to is that EM's nephew, my grandfather, was one of those veterans.
Okay.
And to get his citizenship when he came here, he had to join the Army.
Sure.
And he gained his citizenship at the Army barracks in Richmond. They gave him his papers that he's a citizen. Now you go to Asia.
Okay.
And he fought the Philippines, the Elite, and was in the first round of Okinawa on April 1st, 1945, where he got shot. And somehow some Marine, big Marine, carried my grandfather out of the woods, out of the whatever he was in, and he made it home. And when he came home, he got treated for his injuries. The Army released him on honorary discharge with his Purple Heart and Bronze Star. And he went to work for Uncle. And one of his first jobs was working at the track, counting the cash.
Really?
You know, when everybody made their bets.
So the track opens, he opens it in Foxborough, just happened to be here. There wasn't a huge family clan living in Foxborough at the time, was there?
No, the whole point, I think, with the book and why he is in the visionary section is because he knew that, and he did it all over the country, up and down the East Coast. He had a knack for real estate. He knew where things were. He had the vision that...
He had the vision.
And in the later years, he sold the track in 1976, and that was at the point where he had peaked, his businesses had peaked, and a lot of people were wanting to buy those properties. And with what he had in Foxborough, he had his family was working here himself. You know, everybody was making the daily trip from Boston down to Foxborough to go to work, and with everybody that lived here anyways. But he left it, he left his mark, and he left the town with something to grow on that he knew he couldn't expand on himself.
Well, and now let's talk about, you know, current day. So the Loew's movie theater chain, which is world-renowned, and
is not actually the same.
It's not.
Company, no.
But, so, okay, so then what were the theaters that he owned?
He owned, it was just E.M. Loew's theaters. There is lore that the two families are connected. I could never put the two together. There's no way to put that math together.
Well, now I've learned something.
But E.M., his theaters went from Maine to Florida, and that included the Latin quarters that were in the book. He worked with Barbara Walters, was her father, Loew. Oh my, I can't remember his name. But Barbara Walters' father was his manager, but EM owned it. And he had all the drive-ins, and if you still go to the Worcester Palladium, which not too many people do because it's mostly heavy metal shows, but it still says EM Loew's on the awning to this very day. They won't take it down because it's actually, I believe, a Worcester historic deal. So there are some traces of EM Loew's decadence, if you will.
We'll call it opulence.
But I mean, they really lived above and beyond. They really did it. And
well, you know what they say: a showman is a showman.
Yeah. And when you look back and you think about what he left, we got lucky that it got scooped up by someone.
So let's talk about what he left. The Bay Street Raceway became Foxborough Raceway, and that was sold, and the surrounding properties went through. And then we had a little story of the New England Patriots, so the Boston Patriots at the time, playing variously at Harvard,
Fenway, Harvard, BU, BC, anything that had stripes on grass and sticks on the end.
And they needed a home. So the story now is that...
you know, I don't know the pure story, but my understanding is that, my point of view is that he was at the end of his heyday, and he saw that, you know, his interest in sports ownership was very prominent at that time. He wanted to buy the Red Sox when Tom Yawkey died. It didn't pan out.
Really?
Next best thing, what is it? Football.
Well, you know what? And then I suppose we here in Foxborough owe a couple slices of debt. First of all, by just the willingness to take that header and sell to the town for $1 the footprint of the stadium, which of course is the brainchild of the way to attract the team here without being burdened by the tax dollars on the property, but rather on a per ticket fee schedule, which now shows the benefits of keeping the team here. And to this day, that is how the ticketing fees and also the oversight that the Board of Selectmen have on the stadium events, because of that unique relationship where the town owns the footprint underneath the stadium.
And that was maintained when they switched
and then
facilities.
That was a really unique transaction to trade a footprint for a footprint that just happened
and that's
to
another
be
of
exactly
the
the size of the stadium.
There's more ways to make money than just tax and charge.
And it's also important to understand that he also knew you have to attract business. You can't just make it happen. Business is not because of government. Business can be encouraged by government. That's what makes it such a symbiotic, or at least a unique relationship between the Patriots today and the town of Foxborough.
I don't know what the deal was with what the town received from the track. Those details I have no idea, and if we really wanted to dig, we could probably find out. But I did find some interesting notes from...
I love notes. Hit me with them.
From the racetrack. And granted, I got this from Wikipedia. I'm sure it could be found in 105 million ways, but the numbers are real because I've seen them in different spots. But the quote here is that during the track's heyday, the track drew over 10,000 patrons a night. In 1969, the track had its all-time handle with $737,000, $838. I tried my best to fast forward that to 2015 dollars, and that would have been a $4.8 million night. So the man knew what he had.
I guess so.
And I don't know how much the town made that night. I have no way of finding out. I don't really want to do the work. But
you know what the really important thing is, that people like your grandfather made money.
A lot of people did.
The horsemen made money, the town, the vendors, the food distributors, the cleaning crew. Everybody made money because the business was thriving.
And on top of which, he had the parking lots, but that wasn't it. He had woods that no one really had an idea of how much woods he had. And now, after Mr. Kraft has gone through and picked all of the lots up and the stadium and everything around it, even for my family, my grandmother, who's been coming here since the 50s, is shocked when she realizes how much was left on the table.
Yeah. Well, you know what? As they say, development happens, and the only thing that's going to stand still is nothing.
Nothing.
So that's a great story there as far as that goes. So the piece that I'm curious about now is the Loew family now. So you see your grandfather and grandmother are still...
My grandfather sadly passed April 27th, 2005, which was 3 weeks before Heather's wedding.
Oh, you were there too.
I was there too, yes. And I
know Heather, by the way. We were both there.
She got lucky to have met my grandfather, but he was very quiet, very soft-spoken, right up to the very end. You didn't hear any of these details come from him. But my grandmother's still alive, very with it, still living in Newton in her condo, and my mom and my uncle are still there. My uncle has been a season ticket holder since the first stadium opened in '71, so that has put a stamp on that. Parking lot 31, whatever, is still home sweet home for 40 some odd years.
Well, and of course, Max is talking about his lovely wife, Heather, who's also a friend of mine, and your two sons, Matthew and Tyler.
Yep, Matthew will be in first grade with Mrs. Spitz at the IGO.
Oh, shout out to Mrs.
fall.
Spitz. All right, well, there we go. Can't get any better than that.
And Tyler is absorbing everyone very well at the Y every day. So.
Well, Max, it's been a pleasure having you come out. I always love talking about history and learning a little bit more, and I did not know that you were a Loew of the famous Loews here in town.
Well, you know, it's not my news. I'm just sharing it.
So, folks, next time you see Max around town, buy him a coffee. His grandfather helped you enjoy the Patriots. All right, maybe not. That's not the whole reason why we're here. But anyway, you can buy him a coffee anyway.
That's okay, but thank you.
Max, it's been a pleasure having you.
Likewise,
thank you
Bob.
so much. And thank you for joining us here at Foxborough Central. If you have an idea for a future program, why not let me know? Reach out to me at foxcentral@fcatv.org. I'm Bob Hickey, your host. I want to hear from you. And I also want to see you down here at Foxborough Cable Access volunteering, along with all of our other wonderful volunteers like Betty Travers, Deb Storrs, Paul Beck. They're great people. You should come down and say hi to them. And when you do, don't forget to say hi to Mark Nash at the front and see how you can volunteer here at the Cable Studios. Until next time, folks, I hope to see you on this very favorite Cable Access channel. I'm Bob Hickey, your host. Hoping you have a great day. Take care, Foxborough.